So I recently purchased a new 2012 Kia Sorento for my wife and suspected that the spark plugs had not been changed. And when I went in there, definitely they had never been changed, and so glad that I did this. But I thought I'd show you the process that we went through to replace the spark plugs. Unfortunately, on this vehicle, you have to remove the intake manifold, which makes it much more of a hassle than other vehicles. But I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to do this. So for this job, you're obviously going to need 6 spark plugs. I can link to where you can get some for a pretty good price. And then I use this 10mm ratchet, which made the job a little bit easier. 3/8 socket with a 10mm socket. And then there's one instance where I needed a 14mm, but pretty much just the 10mm got the job done. You'll probably want a longer 10mm socket as well, because there's some harder to reach places. And then some hose clamps, because you'll have to remove a few vacuum hoses, but that's pretty easy. And then I use my air compressor, but you'll want something that can blow some air to remove some debris. And then this spark plug socket with a magnet is what I use to remove the spark plugs. And then the spark plug tool to gap and make sure that your gaps are set correctly. And then I have these 2 screwdrivers that help remove some clips. Then I've got some paper towels that I stuck in the manifold. So the first thing you want to do with any job like this where you're dealing with electrical is to remove the negative cable from your battery, just so that you don't risk any kind of electrical shock. Once your battery is disconnected, the next thing you're going to do is remove the air box. So you're going to unclip all the electrical, unclip the box itself, and there's one more clip that's back behind it that you'll have to remove. And then just make sure that everything is unclipped. And then once it's all unclipped around the box, then you can pull the air box and just move it to the side, or you can completely remove it. It may make it easier if it's completely out of the way. I just set mine over to the side. Once everything's unclipped, there's just one more spot that it's going to be connected, and that's to the throttle body. And so if you get a Phillips screwdriver, you can unscrew it. You can also use your 10mm actually, which might make it easier. But you're just going to undo that, and then once it's undone, you can just start to wiggle it out, and it should just pull straight back and come off pretty easily. And once it's off, then you can just move the whole compartment over to the side. We'll start removing the bolts from the intake manifold itself. So there's 2 right at the top that are 10mm. And then once those are out, there's another couple just below them. And so you'll remove those ones as well. And then there's 3 more 10mm that are just right up front. So here's one, and this is where the ratcheting wrench comes in handy, because it's easy to slide under there and it's adjustable. So there's one in that corner. There's one more just like it in the middle. You can see it right here. And then there's one more over on the other side. So there's 3 that go together. After that, there's 2 more 10mm that sit on a mount up above that are holding an electrical clip. And so just remove both of those 10mm and then set them to the side. And then there's 2 10mm nuts on either side of the intake manifold. This is where having a longer 10mm comes in handy. 10mm socket. So you'll remove this one, and then there's one on the other side that's just below the mounting clip. It's kind of hidden back in there, but you'll recognize it because it looks the same as the one on the other side. Now there's 2 bolts hidden on the back. One's just a mounting bolt holding a hose, And so this one's up at the top. It's a little more visible, easy to see, and you can just get back there with your 10 millimeter and undo that one. So there's one more in the back that's a 14 millimeter bolt. It's pretty tricky. It's on the passenger side, and you'll just reach back in there until you can feel it. You won't be able to see it very well, but here's the visual of the 14 millimeter on the bolt. And so you'll take that one out. It should come out pretty easy, but you'll see that it's a fairly large bolt once you get it out. And then the last three holding it in are these three right here on the throttle body, one up top, and then there's one on either side. And so once you remove these, the throttle body should have all the bolts out. So now all the bolts are out that you need to remove to be able to take out the intake manifold. Now it's just a matter of removing the electrical clips that are holding it on. And so as you kind of move the intake manifold around, you can see what's still holding it on. But it should make it pretty easy to just see some of the clips and some of the electrical and hoses that are holding it in. You're not going to damage anything by removing these as long as you remove them correctly. Some of these are kind of a hassle to pop out, but once you get those all out, it should be pretty easy to remove the intake manifold. Just remember where things were clipped into, and any hoses that you remove, just make sure that you put them back when you're done. But you're not gonna, nothing that is connected to the intake manifold is gonna have any liquid or anything like that that's coming out. You should be able to remove, everything fairly easily at this point. The clips and hoses are removed. You can lift this up pretty easy to get back to the spark plugs. You can see I stuck some paper towels in my intake manifold just so no debris drops in there, but now you have easy access back here to the spark plugs. Before I remove any of the coils, I like to vacuum out any of this area and also blow some air through here so that I remove any debris. For those of you that have never done spark plugs, I'll give you an example on one of these, and then you'll just repeat it for each of the other 6. So there's just a 10 millimeter bolt that holds the coil in. It's really simple to remove. So you'll just remove that with your 10 millimeter socket, and then once that bolt is out, you can pull the coil up with no problem, and then you'll see your spark plug sitting just down below where the coil was at. And then we'll move on to the next step of removing the spark plug itself. To pull the spark plug out, I use a special spark plug socket. They fit almost all spark plugs, and then they have a magnet on the inside that'll pull the spark plug out once you get it in and get it unstuck, it'll just pull the spark plug right out once it's once you've twisted it out of its spot. It'll just pull right up with the socket. So just make sure that you're turning the right direction. You don't want to tighten this anymore. The worst thing that can happen when you're doing spark plugs is that you over tighten something and it breaks off, or you mess up the threading by not hand tightening it when you're putting the spark plug back in. So just make sure that you hand tighten everything when you're sticking it in, and then when you're pulling it out, it'll just come right out with the magnet. And then you can see it right here. There's a spark plug. And then just make sure that nothing falls into that hole. So just change these out quickly. You obviously don't want anything to fall in there. And so just keep the area clean and make sure nothing falls in there while you're replacing it with the new spark plug. And then you just want to check your gapping on all your spark plugs to make sure that they're the right gap. These ones are between 0.039 and 0.043 inches. So just make sure you're in that range. And then you will take your spark plug and put it back into the socket. It'll just go in there with the magnet. Should fit really easily. And then you can just drop it in there. And then, like I said, hand tighten it so that you don't cross thread anything while you're sticking the new spark plug in. And then once it's hand tighten a little ways and you feel it get really tight, then you want to use your socket and make sure that when we've got your socket wrench, that you don't over tighten it. Just go until you're pretty tight, hand tight, and then just a tad more, but make sure that you don't over tighten with your socket wrench. And then once everything's in, you can stick the coil back in. It'll slide right over the top of the spark plug. Should be no problem. And then you'll connect it back with your 10mm bolt. Just in case you've never checked the gaps on the spark plug, just going to show you really quick. So you're just going to slide your spark plug gently across this tool. These cost $1 at your parts store. And you just want to make sure on these ones that they don't get stuck before 0.039 or slide past 0.043. And then there's a little circle up on top where you can spread the gap or close it if you need to. But that's just what you're checking for. To get to the back spark plugs, I found it easiest to slide the intake manifold forward and then just access these from the back. It gave me plenty of clearance to get to each of the spark plugs. So I found that was the easiest way to do it. Once you're all finished with the spark plugs, put everything back together the way it was. You can watch this video in reverse if you need help to remember where everything goes. And then also don't forget to reconnect your negative battery terminal when you're done. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. If it was, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're looking for more helpful tips on Kia, Hyundai, or Mazda vehicles.